Let's talk about something most of us probably take for granted: the privacy of our tax returns. That feeling that your financial life is your own business. Well, that simple idea is actually the result of a massive, century long political battle, and we're going to get into how we got here. So, let me just ask you this. What if anyone, your nosy neighbor, a journalist, maybe a competitor, could just go and look up how much money you made last year and how much tax you paid? Sounds like a total privacy nightmare, right? Well, believe it or not, for a huge chunk of American history, that's exactly what it was like. The idea that your tax return is this super confidential document, that's actually a pretty new invention. I mean, the history here is all over the place. The government just could not make up its mind. During the Civil War, yeah, your tax info was literally posted on courthouse doors so your neighbors could snitch on you. Then, just a few decades later, in 1894, Congress makes it a crime to publish that same info. Fast forward to 1909, and oops, corporate returns are public again. And then with the modern income tax in 1913, we get this really weird middle ground where tax returns were technically public, but only the president could say who was allowed to see them. This whole mess just set the stage for decades of fighting. And this wasn't just some small disagreement. This was a full-on 70-year debate that slammed two core American values right into each other: the public's right to know versus your right to privacy. Let's break down the two sides here. So on one side, you had people arguing that sunlight is the best disinfectant. If everyone's tax returns were out in the open, it'd be way harder to cheat. But on the other side, the Treasury Department was almost always pushing for confidentiality. Their whole argument was pretty simple. People are going to be more honest if they feel like they're just confiding in the government, not the entire world. They were worried that making everything public would just feed what they called idle curiosity and not really do anything to help collect taxes. And you can really hear the frustration in this quote from Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon back in 1925. There was this brief period where newspapers were actually publishing lists of how much tax people paid, and he was basically saying it served no purpose other than gossip and selling more papers. Okay, so this whole tension just exploded in 1934 with this wild experiment called the pink slip. The idea was that every single taxpayer would have to file this little pink form with all their key financial info, and anyone could go look at it. But the backlash was immediate and it was fierce. People started imagining kidnappers using these slips as a shopping list to target wealthy families. The public outcry got so loud that Congress ended up repealing the whole law just a year later, before it even really got going. So for the next few decades, that system of presidential discretion just kind of stayed in place. But by the 1970s, that whole system was about to completely break down, and it led to this massive crisis of confidence in the government itself. So what happened? Well, over time, tax returns had basically become what one report called a generalized governmental asset. Pretty much any federal agency that wanted your tax data could get it, no problem. And this really escalated under President Nixon. For example, he signed an executive order that let the Department of Agriculture look at the tax returns of every single farmer in America. And even worse, the Watergate scandal started to reveal that the White House might be using confidential IRS data as a weapon against its political enemies. I mean, the situation got so bad that the misuse of tax data actually became part of a proposed article of impeachment against President Nixon himself. This wasn't just a bad policy anymore. It was a full-blown constitutional crisis. The public's trust was completely shattered, and Congress knew it had to do something big. And that crisis is exactly what led to what you could call the Great Privacy Reset. Congress basically decided to yank control back from the White House and build a whole new system from the ground up. This whole reset was built on two huge pieces of legislation. First, you had the Privacy Act of 1974, which set out these broad new rules for how the government could handle information on citizens. And that was followed by the Tax Reform Act of 1976, which took those ideas and applied them directly to the IRS. And Section 6103 of that Tax Reform Act completely flipped the script. Before 1976, the rule was, your tax return is public, unless the president says it's secret. After 1976, the rule became, your tax return is confidential, period. It can only be disclosed in very specific, very limited situations that are spelled out in law by Congress. The president no longer gets to make that call. And this change wasn't just on paper. The new laws came with some serious teeth, creating real, tangible consequences for anyone who breaks the rules and leaks your tax info.
So today, if a federal employee willfully and unlawfully shares your tax information, they're guilty of a misdemeanor, and they can be personally fined up to $5,000. It puts a clear criminal penalty on violating that trust.
But it's not just about criminal charges. The law also gives you, the taxpayer, a way to fight back directly. I mean, think about it. If someone leaks your return, how do you even begin to calculate the damage to your reputation or just your peace of mind? Well, the law recognizes how hard that is. So instead of making you prove an exact dollar amount, it sets a floor. You can sue the US government, and you're entitled to at least $1,000 for every single time your information was unlawfully disclosed. It's a powerful statement that your privacy has real concrete value. So when you're getting your W-2s together and filling out your forms this year, it's worth just taking a second to think about all the history that brought us to this point. What's the real legacy of this long and complicated fight?
It's this, right here. It's the simple, powerful, and now legally enshrined expectation that your financial life is your business and nobody else's. And that's a right that wasn't just given to us. It was hard-won over decades of debate and one huge political scandal.
But you know, this story isn't over. In our world of big data, AI, and constant government expansion, the debate is still very much alive. The core question is the same as it's always been. How do we strike that crucial balance between what the government needs to know and our fundamental right to be left alone? That's the question this history really leaves for all of us to answer.